What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Motorfest. So today is indeed Wednesday once again, which of course means the summit is now reset. Now for this week though, we have the this versus that, which normally means you have to drive a vehicle versus that. I really am getting terrible at this, but nonetheless though, it is going to be a fairly decent summit, basically completely on hypercars, which I would say for the most part, many players are probably going to like the fact that you will have to use a hypercar in basically every single event. Of course, going back to last week being, street tier 2 vehicles. On top of that, we're also going to have a Slalom, a lovely Speedtrap, and an Escape. Now, one thing I do want to mention though is in this summit though, there is going to be a fairly decent amount of vehicles you can use. For example, if you did want to, you can actually run a Lamborghini Aventador for basically all four of the events here, which by the way, I thought about doing that, but I was like, you know what, let's mix this around a bit and maybe run different vehicles. But my goodness, that Aventador is going to be pretty dang insane for the most part. And then, of course, you also get to use the Nobile M600. And also, you have to use a vehicle based in the UK. So, I once again use the Nobile M600, which, by the way, is going to be a fairly decent vehicle. Like, yeah, it might not be like the fastest thing out there, but my goodness, that car is honestly going to be pretty dang dope. Now, moving over to the skills, though, there is going to be a slalom here on the left side, which of course is going to be a no restriction, which does mean you can pretty much use any vehicle of your choice. Now, for some odd reason, I was feeling kind of Hoonicorny, so I did end up picking the drift class, even though if you guys are wondering, you can easily run any class of your liking. The big thing here is, of course, going to be a score breaker set. If you do have one of those, you can basically run any vehicle class you would like to. Now, moving over to the next one is going to be a speed trap. To be honest, I would say this one's probably going to be fairly simple. Even running this completely solo, you can probably get a pretty high score. The only issue with this with pretty much every skill in a summit right now is going to be the traffic. For some odd reason, they basically spawn in the worst places ever. Of course, going over like the hill right next to the objective, or most likely spawning right in front of the objective itself. Now for me though, I did end up running the Dodge Viper SRT10, which is great. It also does turn pretty dang decently compared to like the C7 and many of the other drag cars in this game that, can't even turn a bit. Now, one thing I do want to mention though is the dragster class in this game is going to be a lot faster than it was in the Crew 2 before. Crazily enough, the dragster class can hit around 430 miles an hour. Not even kidding, guys. By yourself, if you are perfect using a chemist, they legit can hit crazy high speeds like that without slipstreaming. Now, for the last skill in this summit, though, honestly did make me laugh. So, yes, it is going to be an escape. And for this, though, it is going to be the exact same one we actually saw last week. So, you can probably do, like, the exact same thing, like run, like, an Alpha GP or, like, even run a hypercar. To be honest, I would say the best way to do this one, though, is probably going to be an Alpha GP. And then, of course, my second pick would most likely be a hypercar. Now, for me, though, as I did end up going through the tunnel, and that's probably going to be a nightmare. Funnily enough, I also think I was faster last week getting over 6,000 yards, but to be honest, I'm most likely not going to jump back into this one to get like another 2 to 3,000 points and most likely suffer with the traffic. Now moving over to the main events in the summit here. Now for this week though, there's luckily not going to be any modifiers whatsoever. So of course you can run like your main part sets and also your own pro settings on your vehicles, which I would say is going to make many players insanely happy. Now for this though, there is going to be a fair amount of vehicles you can run in them. Like, yeah, you can basically run any vehicle from like Italy, so obviously like a Ferrari or like even a Lamborghini. And then of course on the main event here, you have to use the Aventador. Now funnily enough though, on all of these events, I did end up running the Lamborghini Aventador on all of them. Now you don't have to do that necessarily, but I was like, you know what? Let's throw some settings on this car and see how it does indeed do. I have to admit guys, this car is going to be fairly decent. I might also have to jump into like some PvP with the Aventador, but for the first event though, it is going to be primarily like a highway type of event. So the big thing here is of course getting past the AI itself. And then after that, you're going to want to keep the speed up on this vehicle. So yay, Chemist Set is going to help it. And then on top of that, the Aventador hits around 307 miles an hour. Now moving over to the next event though is going to be in the rain. And I would say that is going to affect the vehicles in a slight way. But you're most likely going to see the Aventador and the lovely Revolto. Not sure if I said that right. And also the lovely Ferrari F8 Spider. Now keep in mind in this event though, there is going to be lots of tight corners. You can cut them a bit to of course get to the checkpoint a bit easier in that aspect. I would say it's probably going to shave off a few seconds here and there. Now moving over to the next event though is going to be a pretty long one. It's also going to have lots of cuts in this one as well. You guys are most likely going to recognize this event the second you jump into it. Now for this, I once again picked the lovely Lamborghini Aventador. Keep in mind though on this event guys, I'm not going to lie, I definitely did not hit every single cut. For some odd reason, I'm not the biggest fan of like going through them or like, using every single cut in the game. I do know they're probably going to be there to get you faster, but if you are wondering which event this is, that is going to be the lovely Roadie Rumble, which is going to be part of the Bike Lovers playlist. Now, for this event though, the checkpoints are going to be fairly spread out from each other. So of course on the flip side, you can go up mountains and also down them. Of course using a hypercar, which makes no sense. But if you're not going to do the main cuts in this event though, you're most likely not going to get under 4 minutes or close to it. But for the last event here is going to be a no restriction hypercar event, and of course I did end up picking the Aventador. I would say the number one vehicle is most likely going to be the Bugattis, and you might even see the lovely Ferrari F8 Spider, which does seem to be pretty dang good as well. It's also going to be a pretty long race, around 4 minutes, so I would expect to be driving a good amount in this one. There is going to be lots of corners and stuff, so if you are speeding up insanely quick, do be careful going around the corners because they honestly can sneak up on you, and I would say they're probably going to be like a bit tighter than many of the other corners that you would see in some of the other events. Now moving over to the last two events here, I did end up picking the exact same car on both of them, which is going to be the Nobile M600. Now I would say overall this car is not going to be a terrible option. I'm not going to lie though, when first jumping into this thing I honestly thought it wasn't that great. I then adjusted the settings on that thing slightly and my goodness, it's actually pretty dang good. And then for the last event in this summit, I once again used the Nobile M600. I would say overall this car really is going to be fairly impressive. Now I do want to mention though, if you are running manual guys, keep in mind this thing is going to be a 6-speed manual. So I would recommend not shifting the car insanely often because it does over rev. So I was finding myself pretty much having a bit more speed coming out of those corners and also going into them. And you can most likely squeeze a bit more power out of that vehicle with it over revving. So I would say on the flip side, it's probably going to be a pretty positive thing on a car. Overall though guys, I would say this summit's probably going to be a pretty fun experience. If you have any questions at all, let me know in the comments below. Let's jump right into this.